When I came from Germany 30-some years ago, I realized on the East Coast I did not see so much First Nation culture, and I didn't know why that was the case. I believe it's very important that First Nations get more recognition in North America and the world, and so that's a big part of what we're doing here.
We bring our old ancestors' ways into today, just to keep that alive.
The meaning behind my art would be about the residential school survivors and missing and murdered Indigenous women. I talk about things that are happening in my life at the moment.
My spirit name is Miskake No Den, which is medicine wind. So then when I have my name, I felt like I have to share whatever I know and teach the young kids. Friends United is reviving our culture back.
Here you feel supported and nurtured. Like we all, at some point in our life, need that moment that somebody says, I believe in you.
The center just helps us be a community within just artists.
Friends United is a team of many people with the same idea to work together constructively to honor First Nations and to make sure they have their place in history, and to really to promote peace, friendship, and reconciliation.
Welcome to the Friends United International Convention Centre in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, Canada. We are in conversation today with the man himself, Rolf Bouman, who is the creator of this place. I know you've had many people join with you in creating this amazing project, both the place and the broader initiative, but I have to call this the house that Rolf built.
Well, not quite, because the place was already existing when we purchased it, except it was an old building falling apart.
Yes, so the shell was here, but what is now contained within the shell of this building is something that knocks people off their feet at the front door. I've watched it. Everyone, in fact, I have an idea that we should put a camera that is like a security camera that is focused on the front door so you can get the reaction of people when they step in through the threshold. It's like stepping into another world. And while the shell was here, you dreamed this up, and not only dreamed this incredible dream, but you made it happen. And I can't wait to talk to you about how you've done that.
Well, I guess I was lucky enough to bring many good people together to have an idea and a vision many years ago, and I was lucky enough to be able to implement that. Many people in their life trying to do things, and they're trying really hard, and it's still not working out. And I was always lucky enough where when I had a dream, it took sometimes 30 years like this one, but things did come together. Because you're a believer. Well, I believe in hard work, but I also believe in teamwork. Together we're stronger, and this place, if it weren't for all these really good people, wouldn't be here, obviously.
No, I understand that, and I fully appreciate it, having spent some time here. And when I say it's the house that Rolf built, I mean that it couldn't have been done without your vision, but I understand a lot of people have hammered nails, you know, metaphorically, and provided lumber and all of the beautiful pieces that needed to come together as a puzzle to make this happen. Let's go back to your childhood, and I would like you to describe what your first memory was growing up in Germany of being introduced to the First Nations in Canada.
I guess my childhood would have been much like other people's childhood. We had books from an author called Karl May. Karl May lived about 100-some years ago, and he wrote about First Nations, specifically, obviously, on this continent here. He had this fiction novel of an Apache chief called Winnetou, and he had a friend, some other white friends, if you want to call them white, and they became a really good team. They were out there to bring peace and friendship always to First Nations and to the other white people, the soldiers, whoever, like the settlers, whoever was out there. And they together accomplished many great things. I think there's about 80 books out. This man wrote for all of his life, Karl May, but these books were translated into many different languages, and therefore most Europeans would really know them.
But Karl May was German?
Yes, Karl May was German. Oh yeah. And the really funny part, he wrote this book, as far as I know, in prison. He had never been on this continent before at the time, but he had done so much research. They had just in his mind there had to be friendship between First Nations and the white man. And he wrote books which were then, by the way, filmed in the 60s and 70s. And that's why so many Europeans know. They're actually extraordinarily nice movies, films done at the time especially. And they grew up with that. So you would play sometimes even cowboys and Apaches and do all these things together. It was very nice.
And what strikes me is that I grew up with Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys books, which are pretty inconsequential in terms of the theme compared to what you were reading in Germany about Canada's history and North America's history. So I don't know where Karl May was for me, but I wish I had been introduced to his beautiful series when I was a child. And what I love is that, in my view, what you're doing here is bringing that beautiful, positive message that he locked onto to Canadians.
That is most important, because I find in North America in general, there's still an underappreciation of the First Nations in many ways, and that's very sad. I've seen actually even a lot of prejudice still, and I guess one of the things the center is trying to do is to really fight prejudice. And we could do that already, because I had seen some people who did not have a very positive attitude towards First Nations, and once they were here, it really changed a lot. In fact, they became friends with many of our First Nations artists, and that's also much what this place is all about, friendship and peace. And I think we're getting there more every day.
I love the fact that it's called Friends United. And when we first spoke some months ago, and you told me the name was Friends United, I didn't really understand that fit what I was hearing about it. And now, knowing everything I know about the center and the project and the people who are involved, there's no better name.
Well, it was very important to me. It took quite some time to think about the name for our initiative. And it became clear that before, some people would have competed, artists or even others. And they clearly said, together we're stronger, let's do everything together. And that meant for the artist buying supplies, which we're supplying anyways to the artist, but it meant also doing marketing together, teaching each other in friendship. Jay is one of our main artists. He has been great to teach the others. So it's about the friendship. And since I wanted to take the competition completely out of it, it was important to me we would be able to do this. And then Friends United came as a I don't know, it just came. We knew we had to call the Friends United.
Mm-hmm. But it's also about connection in so many ways, on so many levels. You know, it's also about uniting First Nations people with average Canadians out there who don't know enough about their history and as you say, might have prejudice. My way of thinking about this center is that it is a bridge between prejudice and reverence.
I would concur 100%. In fact, if I had to describe what it is that we do, I would precisely call it bridge building. It is more important nowadays than ever before, because there's still way too much prejudice out there. And I find, due to all the electronic equipment these days, people don't talk enough. Mind you, I like Facebook and whatnot, but people send text messages, they send emails, and rather than talking to each other, looking into each other's eyes, hearing a voice, they just talk, and that alone brings a lot of misunderstandings and friction. And therefore, it's important we learn how to communicate again, and we teach our children. And this is much what this place is all about, really how to communicate.
Well, I love the fact that you mentioned Facebook, because one of the things I don't like about Facebook is that it has changed the definition of the word friends. to say you have a friend on Facebook, they can be someone that you don't really know, you've never had a soulful conversation with, you know, they've never shown you their real selves. It's very much about the PR. Here's how beautiful my life is. Whereas I might really have some troubles and challenges, but I'm showing something that's very different on camera or on Facebook. And the Friends in Friends United is a kind of deep, meaningful connection that is what we need in this world. And I think in order to have connection, you need to have an open heart. You can't actually have a meaningful connection if you don't show your real self. And I believe that the way you show up in the world is with an open heart. And you embrace people in friendship in a way that is very authentic, and they respond to you. And so they might think you're crazy at first, because who's really that generous and who is really that inspired and has this big a vision? But when they realize who you are, because you show them, then they're on board all the way.
Well, it's important when you talk to anybody, work with anybody, to see what the strong and the weak points are, and to make sure you can help with the strong points and nurture everything. And even if they do have weak points, help them with those weak points. And that's again what this is all about. You come together and you help each other. So at the end of the day, you have a vision, a product ready for the world to see. That usually is how you honor First Nations. As I was saying before, First Nations by far have not received enough appreciation, at least as far as I'm concerned. And if we can change that, I would be very happy. So the one thing you have seen already, you have interviewed probably 10 people yesterday and today who are connected to this project. I like genuine people. I like people that have a real heart. Whether it's business or what we do here, this is not a business. If you don't have the right spirit in your heart, then things are not really going to go very far. And that's the important part. The people who come here come together in friendship. Not to say there wouldn't be sometimes a disagreement, but you know, we settle that and we talk, and again, we're like with respect to each other, and we just respect other people's opinions. That's most important, obviously. Have your own, but if others have another one, well, let it be. Everybody has a reason or has a right to have their own opinion. That's really important. And that's why, again, friendship comes with a lot of sometimes for other people room to expand, you know, to accept the other person and to see how we can do something together with them. In other words, it's lining up the interest for everybody into the same direction, and that usually has worked pretty good here.
Tell me about your immigrant story.
That is such a long story. Wow, I can't believe it.
Your Reader's Digest version of the Rolf Bouman immigrant story.
Well, I came to Canada as a car mechanic, and I worked at a coal mine as a welder there for a while. I also was a farmer in Germany. I had 2 apprenticeships. I came at the age of 21, I recall. I did many different things. I cut pulp, I planted trees, but I also worked for the immigration department in Sydney. And this is how connected eventually with many other people, because they would refer me to not just immigration issues for interpreting, but essentially to surveyor firms, to engineering firms, law firms, to brokerage firms. And then I realized there could be, if somebody were to become a land developer, a lot of possibilities opening up a European market, which we did do. I mean, I had no business experience and no money. It was within English, the School of Hard Knocks, by all means. But I learned from many good people, and they were willing to share their information and experience with me. And then things just grew. And at some point in time, as the land development companies became bigger, I realized it was time to give back. Because no matter how you slice and dice it, First Nations were first. They're called First Nations for a reason, right? And I said, we can now, you know, discuss what's the land there, so not to what extent, but ultimately something was taken away. And I felt for me it was time to give back in 2 ways at least. We took much of the proceeds of the land development, put it back into First Nations projects, which worked out pretty good. And number 2, since First Nations were deprived of the land, I thought it was time to give land back. So if an artist, or carpenter for that matter, would come and they would say, listen, I would like to contribute, and I would like to work for a piece of land because we have 5 different companies. We would connect the publishing house, which we started to help First Nations in the first place. We would connect the publishing house with the land development companies, and we would trade paintings for property. And suddenly a lot of artists had land. And once you own the land, whether you do your own ceremonies on their traditional things, if it's a bonfire, fishing, whatever they do, it just connects you differently even to Mother Earth yet. And that was important to me. Along with it comes pride, and it's even something they can give to their children when they pass away. They have their own piece of land now.
It's a transformative transaction.
I suppose so, yes.
And it also honors what they do, because it honors their art. To give that value to their art is really giving them a sense of confidence and a sense of being valued. I love that.
It kind of came about naturally. See, many things here, I never really forced anything. I let things come about, I let things evolve. And it became a natural conclusion. Some of the artists would say, boy, would I love to have my own piece of land, but I'll never be able to afford that. It's so far out of my reach. And I would say, well, not really. Well, yeah, I said, no, not really. And I said, well, let me see if this is really what you would like to do. Maybe we can make things happen. So my job has been much with Friends United, especially acting and helping, but also listening. I mean, you can only help once you really know where help is needed, right?
Is that where it started? So was the land kind of deal, the idea where the seed was, and then the idea for the initiative came out of that?
Well, what happened, I suppose, if I go 10, 15 years back, my life became very commercial. There were all these accountants and I don't know, lawyers and whatnot, and that certainly didn't give me any spiritual satisfaction. While we have good lawyers and they're good friends, and some of them are even musicians also as a hobby, but I mean, I needed something else. I ended up buying a painting, and the artist, who is deceased now, became really good friends afterwards.
David Brooks?
David Brooks. I realized it was helping him, but yet when I asked him if he could do more paintings, he said no, for 2 reasons. One, he said, I don't have the supplies, I can't afford them. And number 2, he said that there were so many galleries in Canada who didn't pay, or which didn't pay me, but which said the paintings were stolen or burned or lost or whatever. I kind of stopped painting. And I said, what would it take for you to restart? And he said, well, supplies for starters, but he said many other things. And so for the next 4 or 5 years, I would go to David's place once a month. I would pick up 5, 10, 12 paintings, whatever it was. He became really creative and one of the leading Mi'kmaq artists. And at one point in time, he said, listen, Rolf, I've done about 200 paintings for you.
So you would buy those paintings from him?
I mean, he could have sold them to somebody else. I gave him the supplies, but he chose to sell them to us. He didn't have to. Yes. And he said, Rolf, I can't do this no more. I said, what are you talking about? I can no longer paint traditional. I said, well, I didn't ask you to. You are the artist, whatever you want to do. He said, well, I would like to paint Picasso style. And I said, that's different. I said, well, try. And then for the next 2 years, he painted Picasso style. And it was amazing. If you look at his very amazing modern artwork, you would never think of First Nations art that they do it, except he even did combine some First Nations subject and themes with the modern artwork. It was amazing, and I learned to respect him a lot and his family, and I learned a lot from him, and he was an amazing man.
And so that started a ball rolling.
Well, yes, because what also happens, First Nations are very connected amongst each other. One, they could be related, but 2, they know each other through Facebook very often. And the message got out there that German, crazy German, is buying all this artwork. And things evolved. More and more people came on board. But I realized also 2 things. It would go far beyond our financial reach because it started really costing a lot of money. But number 2, I listened to the artists well, and what they were always saying, once we sold the painting, we have no more revenue. And to me, that was sad, because if an artist would have been sick or whatever, no paintings, no artwork, no revenue. So I said, let's take this the next step further. And the artist would say, well, we would like to do some prints. Well, we couldn't do prints because I didn't know how this works. We had no publishing house. So then we started a publishing house, and they could make money by selling reproduction rights. The next step was we said, if you would like to do prints, you can hand sign them. We would then keep half for later on. They would sell the other half, so they would have a lot of prints. Then they were doing postcards. So we would buy 100,000 postcards at a printing company in Ontario. I think it was $7,000, 7 cents a piece. They would do paintings for $7,000, and suddenly the artist had 100,000 postcards to sell. And they had more products suddenly, and this evolved more and more. Some artists have been more successful than others, but overall, we're all very happy with the results because they started to really become not just business people, but they became artists who were evolving all the time, that taught their families, that became role models within their own communities, which was really important to me. And it brought the message out that even if you don't know anybody and you're not so connected, you have no business education, there's still hope. And knowing, we talked about this before, that First Nations are the fastest growing communities in all of Canada, but at the same time they do have the highest suicide rate amongst children. Mm-hmm. I saw suddenly where we could put a lot of hope into those communities because parents taught their children and they came on board, they also became artists, and other parents would say, wow, look what can be done, these things are possible. And I think so far this has gotten us very far. We're getting a lot of good comments, but yet I'm open to other suggestions. As long as I'm healthy, I'm around, and we have some funds to spend, we'll keep on helping. I mean, we should definitely mention this is not a government-funded project. It's only funded by our own companies.
You took the words out of my mouth. That was my next. I was waiting to interject to say, I want to make sure that people understand this is your money. This is the product of your business success with no grants, no government money. It has been, you're the engine.
Well, I felt two things. I do not know much about politics, but when you do get involved in politics or you ask for grants, then there might be expectations from other people. And I felt there should be no expectations in the artist, especially from the artist, something like to do something unless they wanted to. So we made sure that things grew slowly but healthily, and we made sure that things would be long-term sustainable. And by staying out of politics completely and by not taking any government funding, we prove another point. Things can be done if you have the right people that stick their heads together with the right minds and the right intentions.
And an extraordinary level of generosity. Well, I know you want to be humble, but that is the thread that runs through every conversation I have with other people about this.
Yeah, but it's so much fun to help other people. I mean, you know, I have this theory in life. I'm not a very religious man, and although I was brought up in also residential school in Germany, Catholic school, but I have this theory in life. You're here for 3 reasons, at least that I can think of. One, if we have children, we should bring those up with the best values. Not talk about money, but the best ethics, the best, education for that matter too. Number 2, there are so many other people who could use our help, and sometimes we tend to think something is bad for us. No, there's other people doing worse than us, always others. We can help those. And the best part is when you can help them and they don't know about it. And the third part is if there's such a thing as a soul or spirit, First Nations, Buddhists, Christianity, whoever is out there, call it anything you want to, call it a divine thing that connects us all. We should give that soul the best experience possible in this life. And I firmly believe that is family, and I firmly believe that is helping other people. It's not having so many fancy houses or whatever and having so much money in your bank account. It's about helping. That's really at least helping my soul to evolve and be really happy when I can help other people.
Beautiful. Will you describe the center? So describe from your perspective what this place is now and what it holds.
Well, it used to be old, dilapidated building falling apart, obviously. We bought it years ago because we needed a right-of-way to this property, and we had to buy the building with it. For a long time, it was vacant, fell apart more. Then we put a roof onto it, and the leaks were gone, and we fixed cars in this building for quite some time. I should mention before it was a fish hatchery. Yes. So there were many millions of salmon hatched in here. We didn't own it and we bought it from somebody else who had it before.
And I love the symbolism that the fish eggs and the fertility and the creation, and now look at what it is. And the water, everything about it.
A lot of life was created in this building going back, and again, then it was falling apart. So we fixed it up, we fixed our cars in here then for quite some time. But about 10 years ago, so it occurred to me, our First Nations project was just starting. We would need more space, storage, for meeting, for conventions, for display. And as we had money available, over 10 years, we did one room at a time. Finally, we're pretty much finished, and the building inspector's not quite happy with us yet. We'll get there. But I'm happy with what I see, and the artists feel very honored when they come in here. And you just mentioned something. The outside of the building would never tell you what's on the inside, and that's important because on the outside it looks like another industrial building. Once you open the door, you get a different idea.
It's that threshold. Crossing over the threshold, it's like you're walking into Narnia. You know, the beautiful book Narnia, it's a whole different world.
But yet one must never forget what makes this building so special are the people who have created the artwork in here, the people who come here and share their stories and teach others. It's also a center of friendship, a friendship center, really, Friends United. I come here sometimes at night, play the piano or drink a tea or whatever, relax, and 4 of the artists by now are deceased, and I miss them a lot. They taught us much, and at least we could, through some videos and through the artwork in the center, tell their life story. It's really, really important.
I get a sense that the artists whose work is displayed here feel honored that this gorgeous architectural space is dedicated to showing off their work.
I think they are, and it was important to me, the friends also, that we would do this in the right surroundings. It's much about light and open space and many things, design and whatnot. And this building reminded me of a lot of European industrial buildings, which were industrial buildings then falling apart. It was either tearing them down or converting them into museums or living quarters. And this one, it's not a museum, it's more like a convention center where people come together to exchange ideas. Sometimes more, sometimes less people, but all I know is they do come by now from all across the world.
And do you believe that the purpose for you in doing this is to eventually get this message out to the world?
Well, there's no doubt about it. One of the many reasons why I called you was I knew you from 20 years ago on television, and I thought you would be a very spiritual and happy person, so I called. And the way you came on board, many others have. And of course, all these people are helping us, genuinely helping us bring the story out. And I think it is an important one to be told. Recently, the national chief was here of the Assembly of First Nations, and he said he has never seen quite a place like it in Canada. And it's probably one of the largest, if not the largest facility of its kind. And that made me happy because it showed to me we have been bit catalysts in many things we have been doing. And I hope this model here will inspire people to understand that things can be done without politics and without government funding if some people with the right intentions stick their heads together. Mind you, it takes commitment, yes, it takes energy, I mean, no doubt, but what you get back in the end, what you receive back is so precious in many, many ways. It's a very rewarding experience.
I feel like this should be a template for centers for across the country.
I certainly hope so. As we evolved with the center, I realized it could potentially be just that. And since artists are flying here now, Indigenous artists usually from Vancouver, Thunder Bay, Toronto, Sudbury, and other places across this continent, I realized they're hearing about what we do. They want to be part of what we are doing. And I think their voices need to be heard because, quite frankly, we have also many residential school survivors here as artists, or artists with parents who were residential school survivors. And stories have to be told, just as much as about the missing murdered women. Obviously, that's another very important part. And again, number 3, and that's one thing where I think we really can help and intervene is the suicide amongst the young children, the teenagers. Something has to be done, and sure, the government can, will, should be doing it, has been doing it, I don't know. But all I know here, we were able to give people a sense of pride, a sense of heritage, a sense of tradition,
Hope.
a sense of hope, a sense of family, love, and along with that comes that people, you know, come back and tell us these stories.
So you must have changed some lives. And I think you're changing lives all the time, but you can probably think of a few examples of artists you have brought who have had serious struggles in their lives and for whom this is a whole new chapter and might give them a whole new outlook on life.
In that case, I would go even one step further. There were artists who were no artists before. We encouraged them to paint. They had never painted before. They became leading artists in this country. That's a story I can certainly talk about in a minute. I guess I was fortunate enough to change in two ways people's lives. Through the land development companies, we have a lot of European clients. We found many immigrants, and they came here, started businesses, and brought their families. So that was a good thing because they certainly contribute to the mosaic, you know, of Canada. But then in many other ways, we could change First Nations artists. I recall one person very dear to my heart, the whole family, is Loretta Gould. I mean, all these artists are my friends, but Loretta specifically had an interesting story. She did very beautiful quilts, and she came here one day and wanted to sell some. And I saw them. I usually don't purchase quilts, but they were so beautiful because they were not just printed and stitched, they were patch by patch by patch done. Immaculate, very spiritual. I mean, just a perfect sense for doing quilts. And we bought them. And I said, would you entertain painting? She said, no. And I said, why not? She said, I don't paint. I said, well, I know you don't paint, but would you try? She said, no.
Nope.
I said, I would give you all the supplies. She said, no. I said, well, would you please try it? And her husband said, honey, if the man gives you all the supplies, try it at least, will you?
And her sewing machine broke. Yes. I love that. The universe broke her sewing machine.
So she said, darn, I got to paint. And she did start painting, and she came in 2 or 3 weeks after with an immaculate painting. And my first question was, who did it? She said, I did. I said, how did you do it? She said, well, I don't know. I just knew how to do it. I said, but you never painted before. She said, well, I still just knew how to do it. And they told me a story that many First Nations, and I've seen this over and over again, have an incredible talent for art. It's something in their genes, in their, I don't know, in their teachings from their parents that they have that others cannot do. Because we've done this with other First Nations friends, artists too, and they have become incredibly good artists in terms of everything, style, technique, spirituality, subjects they paint. I mean, they have become true cultural ambassadors for Canada, for Nova Scotia, for Cape Breton for that matter, and of course for their own communities more than anything else.
Tell me about how you bring people in from across the country.
Well, that's a good question. I really don't bring them in, they come here all by themselves. Once you do something, and I think you do it with the right intention and with the right spirit in your heart, and it has long-term sustainability and long-term vision, especially in First Nations, people talk a lot fast. And of course, naturally, they would be first very suspicious because of 500 years of not very good history. But once they know you are their friend and once they know you're here to help them, I think word gets out there pretty fast. And they're looking often for hope. And many people had rough times in their life. Could be residential school, could be due to it, drug problems, could be alcohol, could be many things. But the art is to them like an extra valve, like hope, like the creativity that they can let out and something meaningful. Years ago, I used to fix cars. And when I fixed the car, a customer came and had a broken car. And when I was done, he was happy and smiling because I fixed his car. Now I push a lot of paperwork. I'm not saying that's bad, but it's different. And so the artists, I'm always lucky enough often to see how the paintings evolve. They start and then more and more and more happens every day. Sometimes I'm lucky enough to make a suggestion And when the final product comes out, it's almost like Christmas for me. You know, they unveil the painting and something beautiful comes out. And they have a smile, and sometimes they say, look, Rolf, we have an idea what we want to call the painting, but it's a special subject. Will you help us name the painting? And that's always my biggest honor, helping them name a painting. It's very meaningful, and I'm very grateful for that.
What is your great vision? And I'm sure, like this project in its entirety, your vision has evolved from when you first had the idea to create the center. I'm sure there's been an evolution. Where is that vision sitting now? What would you love to create?
There's a vision out there, but at the same time, I'm so open for new suggestions. People do guide me all the time. Many people have been guiding me on this project. Rodney MacDonald, our former premier, when there was a lot of politics, I approached him to help. Another dear friend would happen to be Stephen Augustine, the Hereditary chief, who is also the vice president of Cape Breton University. But also, he worked in Ottawa for a long time as a curator at the Museum of
Civilization.
It was.
Beautiful museum.
He was one. Other people, Mary Coyle, who used to work at CANEC. I think she ran the Coyle Institute for quite some time.
And now she is spreading the word in the Senate, from her Senate office. She's spreading the word because she has your paintings on the walls.
Interesting enough, in between, once she was done at the Cody or didn't work so much anymore, I said, Mary, I know you to be a very spiritual person, and Mary has a very warm heart too. I said, Mary, would you come on board? She said, with what? I said, well, I'm doing this First Nations project. And she said, okay, I'll take a peek at it. She was so happy. She became a consultant for the project, and she must have interviewed 40, 50, 60 people. And then shortly before she was finished, she said, well, I have good and bad news. The bad news is I cannot finish the project, but the good news is I can spread the word because I really, really believe in what you're doing here. And she became a senator, and independent one at that. I like that because, like myself, I like not to be so much into politics or be involved. And Mary tells our First Nations story in Ottawa, and she shares it with other First Nations senators and everybody else who wants to hear it. And she is a big fan of what we do. But I think the biggest part is she, as you were just saying, has paintings in her office from many artists, Mi'kmaq artists and others. She really knows she can make a difference in many people's lives, and that's exactly what she has been doing, even at the Coyle Institute, actually, especially there, obviously. And we have a person there that's also, very happy about what we do. So Mary guided me in many ways, as did Rodney MacDonald, as did Stephen Augustine. Stephen grew up in Germany, Hereditary chief. It's a long story, but from the age of 8 to 12, he was in Germany as a child. Some other chiefs helped, Chief Lawrence Paul, who died in the meantime, who also was in Germany during his younger years. And I found through many of the older chiefs, there's quite a connection between the German people and between First Nations. I had no idea. And once I realized that, Sean Atloy, our former national chief, has German relatives also.
And you've told me that Chief Morley Googoo has been very involved?
Yes, he also came on board in that he's certainly into politics, but I mean, he has, especially when it comes to this project here, always endorsed it because he saw it's the right thing to do. He saw it works without government involvement. He saw it works without government funding. And more than that, he saw Loretta from his own community, who as an artist evolved, and the whole family blossomed and flourished, and it worked so well. And I think he's very proud of what has happened in his community. He certainly spread out the message in many, many ways. That's one of the reasons why he brought here recently the national chief and others. We met recently with some former national chiefs also in Halifax, and that's something else. Friends United connects, no doubt, many artists and many First Nations and other North Americans, and fights prejudice. But something else it did do, and I try to push that part, I usually don't push things. I try to say, listen, different politicians, you might have been adversaries in politics, you might have different opinions, but can we at least agree on one thing? First Nations are still not enough appreciated, and we could do more things for them. And so I asked Rodney to bring together, at the time Daryl Dexter was a premier, and John Hamm, we met, and that worked really well, it was a long conversation. But then once Daryl was done in office, Stephen McNeil took over, and the same thing happened. We met for 2 hours. This time it was Stephen and the 3 former premiers, and that's still growing. And as I found out, I didn't know your father was the premier of Nova Scotia too.
And you have a picture of all those former premiers with you, and it's very powerful because it's crossing party lines. Exactly. And what they all have in common is that they love Nova Scotia and they love what they see you doing.
I think so, and so we took it to another level, which was the national chief. Once the national chief was here, he loved it. We had spoken to some former national chiefs. Sean Adleo was there, for starters. Owen McCready was there, many other ones, and I think they really liked what we do and did. And therefore, many former national chiefs know what has been happening. But it was interesting for me to talk to many former national chiefs and to see how the relationship with the government was over the last 10, 20, 30 years. And even there, I can see we can help and get involved, bringing First Nations closer together to the government. In fact, there was a very wise, nice government person long time ago. Catherine Blewett was her name, and Catherine was in Halifax for quite some time. She's in Ottawa now, but she allowed us to do many things. One, we would put many paintings through offices in Halifax, and number two, she brought all the deputies of the province here, and so this is how we did for a long meeting. And I'm just hoping that government, and we met recently again with Stephen McNeil for a long time. This time it took Rodney came along and Michelle Sampson, and I think he committed to coming here. But not just that, I think he knows and understands, and has been understanding already, but now to a larger degree, I think we can do much to First Nations. And by the way, the Premier is the person always in this province to hold the portfolio of First Nations, Aboriginal Affairs, I think it's called. I
would be willing to drive him up here. I'll pick him up and drive him here. It would be so wonderful.
If you can do it. I think people slowly realize we're a catalyst and just a small, tiny platform where we can start many other things. But maybe we can be sort of a role model or pattern for Canada, for the States, for any other country, to help the First Nations receiving the right place that they deserve in history, in the fabric mosaic of any country. And I think we're slowly getting there. It takes time, but as you said yourself, you see there's a lot of love and thought in this center here. And the artists keep constantly advising us how we could do things better or differently. And one of the things I felt, it was by now time to get the story out there more. And that's what you have been doing. Thank you again. So many interviews with so many artists and former government people and chiefs. I feel that all the people who not only work together, but they have the heart in the right spot.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I can feel it. So I want to take you back to the soul of it all and ask you, this started with you loving First Nations art and respecting First Nations people and heritage. Yes. What is it you love about the art?
Well, it started in two ways. Again, I was brought up in Germany with a great sense of reverence for First Nations. But secondly, I think what I saw in all these years is my life was very commercial, and I saw in the art spirituality, friendship, family values, color, truth, the connection to Mother Nature and Mother Earth and Grandfather Eagle. And we have been polluting for way too long this planet with the reasoning we need to have profit. What for? I mean, if we can make a decent living, why do we need billionaires out there? It's time to give back, and that's into environmental technologies and whatnot. We can heal ourselves, our souls, and what connects us the plants, the animals, and the humans are the four elements. We all need Mother Earth. We all need, obviously, the sun. We need water, and we need air. And to say the least, it should be clean. And we have not been doing such a good job keeping it clean. Now, while I'm not a very religious type of guy, somewhere it says in the Bible, we took this planet, Mother Earth, on loan from our children. And you know what? We have not been doing a very good job in giving it back in a good shape. So maybe we can ignite more passion for the environment, and not just that, make people understand we need this. Right now, we talk about oil. Already we're starting to talk about clean water. If we keep this up, we're going to talk about clean air. And if you go to cities like Tokyo, others, even Germany, the clean air is a big problem. We must preserve those elements, and we must stop polluting things in the name of profit, in the name of dividends, in the name of progress, yes, but at what expense, right? And then all the wars being fought on this planet. Could we not rather use that money? And by the way, the sad part is it's called economic growth when we have wars, because it produces all kinds of war machine equipment. Could we not rather do it in environmental technology, space technology, or more solar energy, whatever? There's all these possibilities out there, or curing cancer, whatever there is. Do we need to spend our money on fighting one another and bringing future generations into debt for building war equipment we don't need? I mean, I don't know. So maybe we can think about that and taking that a bit into a different direction. That's much what the artists are doing too. They're painting more and more artwork that is not just spiritual and happy and family and hope, but says, guys, look at what we're doing to this planet. We need to stop this. It has to go in a different direction.
Mm-hmm. So there is such a purpose, there's such a passion, and it's so positive. And I guess I just want to say thank you. And I don't just mean thank you for this conversation, but thank you for being a beneficial presence in the world, because it's a beautiful thing.
Well, again, it comes from the heart, and thank you, because I've seen you became a true believer also after talking to many people here, and that means a great deal to me. See, sometimes I have to take a guess, but with a pretty good gut feeling, if it's a good idea to bring somebody here. And when you came here for the first time, you already had tears in your eyes talking to the artist. And I see you are not just on board, it comes from your heart, and let's do many good things together in the future, whatever they're going to be, for our young generation, for our planet, and for promoting peace and hope, by the way.
Yes, you're stuck with me. You're not getting rid of me now. I'm so excited and privileged to be a part of this.
I'm happy to hear it.
So thank you for that as well.
I thank you too.
Stay tuned.